What is your favorite eBuilder module? For me, it has always been the planning module. I remember the first time I trained on this module. It was for Franciscan Health in Tacoma back in 2012. I was able to show them that this is not a module you need to add a lot of data for to use. It's already captured in the data you enter every day. And I saw on their faces this aha moment that every trainer implementer looks for. See, planning ties together a lot of the key components of the cost module in eBuilder that when the clients we support see how simple it is to use, it just clicks. Implementing the planning module in your organization will increase the use and value of your cost, schedule, and cash flow data, while adding incredibly valuable executive-facing capital plans. I'm excited to share how simple and effective this module is and why it's my personal favorite eBuilder module. So let's dive in. So definition of the planning module. The official eBuilder definition of planning is, quote, planning is used to help you determine the feasibility of planned and potential projects and how they may fit into the scope of the capital plan. Our simplified definition is a playground to see how current and future projects will fit into your program budget. So let's start by going over the key concepts that, if you understand, will make this a lot simpler as you go through it. With planning, everything ultimately boils down to three things. It boils down to cost. What is the cost of each item? Schedule. What is the duration? Cash flow. When will the cost be realized? So as we drill into each feature of planning, we'll be asked to answer those simple questions, which you will see promotes a lot of best practices for your program's use of eBuilder. So the components of the planning module, the capital plan, which is the interface after all the data is entered, where you can view and modify and plan your program. There's a planned projects or a scenarios area. This gives you the ability to input projects that are in a planning stage that you don't have an official budget for. And it will show you how it will affect your program's cash flow. And it's very flexible. And this is kind of the sandbox area of the module. And then the third is the active projects area. And that's where you can add projects that have an approved budget and cash flow set up. And one of the best kept secrets of planning is being able to view cash flow in that module and report on various variances month to month. So, I'll show you that in a bit, but it's really neat how it all kind of comes together. So let's jump to the capital plan. And let me show you the final product of capital plan. And before you do that, you'll see that there's three areas to the capital plan section of planning. There's funding, active projects, and planned projects. So in eBuilder, I'm going to go to my planning module, and I'm just going to jump into a capital plan I've been working on, Avocado's 5-year capital plan. Zoom in so you guys can see. And you'll notice those three areas that I mentioned. You have funding, you have active projects, and you have planned projects. So in a whole, what this capital plan does is it lets you enter in funding locations. So these may be where the money is coming from for your program, and at what time frame that those are going to be entered and spent. So if you go back to the core concepts of cost, schedule, and cash flow, it's definitely apparent in the funding area that those are the three things you need to consider when adding funding. And we'll go into how to add funding when we start a new capital plan in a minute. Your active projects, these are projects that you pull in that are currently going on. So as your PMs are updating your forecast, as your PMs are updating your cash flow and your schedule, all of that will reflect on this capital plan, which is very useful if you're looking at this month to month to make decisions. Everything is already entered in the system. And then your planned projects, these are your scenarios. This is the playground where you can actually add scenarios, enter information in, and then move things around. So those are the three components of a capital plan. And what I want to do is I want to start one from scratch and focus on each of these sections and how to enter them in, so that you can see how you can do this with your organization's information as well. So I'm going to go back to the planning tab. And if you have the permission on your account to add a capital plan, you'll see a budget here that says add capital plan. Before I do that, you'll notice two tabs. You have draft plans and finalized plans. So here are all the plans that we've published and is, for executive viewing. And then here are the ones that are still in progress as we move things around. So there is a difference. You can have a draft plan and then publish, and there is a permission where you can view draft plans or not. So that makes it valuable. You can have your executives only view finalized plans where you can safely kind of play with your draft plans. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new capital plan. And the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to type in a name. So this name will just be Webinar Capital Plan. And it's going to ask me for some custom fields I want to fill out. These are valuable when you report or showing an executive. If you want to show them who's managing each project, how many square feet the project is, if it's part of a certain region or space, just like any of your custom fields. This just gives you the ability of viewing those custom fields on the capital plan itself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick, I want to see who the partner is or the project manager. I want to know the gross square footage, and I'm going to leave the third one blank. I don't need it. And I'm going to hit save. So that gives us our framework. And you'll notice those three categories we talked about: funding, active projects, and planned projects. Funding, active, planned. So the first item we're going to dive into is funding. And funding is very flexible in this module. You'll simply hit the pile of money here. It's an icon I like. I'll go ahead and I'll click on it. And now I'm just going to go ahead and very manually add the different funding sources that my program has. So in this example, we have the new CARES Act funding that just came in. And that's going to give us in 2020, $10 million. 2021, we're going to get $20 million. Then the rest, we're going to go to our typical grants. And that we have 100 million. And we have 200 million. For that item. So very simple, I'm going to enter these in. They do not tie back to the funding sources on your project. You have to enter them in for each capital plan. So if you're doing a program for 5 years of renovations, you would want to enter in the funding sources that you have for those programs and the time that the amount of time that's going to spread across. And then I'm just going to enter one more. Not sure how we're going to get the money past 2021, but let's say we'll take out a loan, and I'm just going to put in some extra money here and some extra money here. All right, so now I hit save, and you'll notice that these items are now reflected on my capital plan. So one thing you'll see here is that I'm really zoomed in actually. You'll see this is fiscal year 2020 and it lists out every month and quarter. I'm gonna zoom out just so we can get a broader view. And now you zoom out, you see the quarters and the months are a little shorter. So this interface of the capital plan, I really like. It's unique compared to all the other areas in eBuilder, but I really like the interface. It's very simple. And to me, it just, I relate to the visual of it. So I have my funding now that's been entered, and that's all there is to the funding side. So kind of jumping back to my slide deck, we've talked about funding. Let's move over to active projects. So there's only one thing you need to know for active projects, and that is you need cash flow set up on the active project for you to be able to add it to your capital plan. So you need an approved budget. If you remember our webinar from last week, in order to use cash flow, you need an approved budget, and you need to apply and update your cash flow inside of eBuilder. Those are the two things you need. So when I go back to the capital plan I'm building, I'm going to add a project. So you'll see here, I have the Project Plus button. I'm going to click on that. Notice how I do not have the Add button next to every single project. That's because the projects that do not have the Add link next to it do not have cash flow turned on. So if your projects are using cost, if they have cash flow enabled, you'll be able to add any of those to this project. And you can use your project views to create a more succinct list that you can add. So you can create a project view for any projects in the program that you want to add to capital plans. And that way you don't have to go through, 1,000 projects or, or more. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the projects that I want. I'm going to add, Avicado Medical University Center. I'm going to add our Orlando branch. I'm going to hit close. So you'll see here the project custom fields carried over. I'm going to make them a little smaller. The square footage of the project, if entered, showed up, and then the amount of the project showed up. And with just that on here, I can now look at this interface and see that my cash flow total for this year, 40,910,000. So my net amount, funding minus cash flow, I've got an abundance of $70 million. So that leaves me a lot of money to spend. Or more importantly, maybe I need to shift out and spend earlier because next year, I'm actually at a deficit of 33 million. So, and that's only my active projects. So I've got room in 2020 to build. I have $70 million to play with. And then in 2022, I have 310 million. But based on my current funding, I'm $33 million short. So I don't have to do anything other than what I'm already doing in eBuilder. Just need to go to the planning module, just need to go to the capital plan area, hit add capital plan in order to get this really beneficial report that you can publish and share with any of the executives or the rest of your team. And just at that, I think it's valuable. But the planned projects adds a completely new component to this. So going back to my slide deck, planned project scenarios, there are 3 components to planned project scenarios. And if you can't guess what they are, I'll tell you, they're cost, schedule, and cash flow. Just like every area in planning, it all ties back to cost, schedule, and cash flow. So let's go look at the planned project area. And I'm just going to jump to a completed capital plan here to show you what the end result looks like before we build one from scratch. Here are all my planned projects. So if I click on one, you'll notice I've got the cost, I have the schedule, and then if I double click any of these lines, there's a cash flow behind it. So when I set these 3 things up, what it does is it calculates into your capital plan how this affects your overall program. So let's go ahead and let me show you how to build these scenarios. So in order to build a scenario, I'm going to go to the planning tab, and you'll notice that planning takes me to the capital plans area. The key here is that in order to add a scenario, you have to be inside of a project. So that is kind of the biggest difference between how to access and use the features in this module. Some clients have no idea how to add scenarios just because they think that this is planning, that what they see on the screen is all there is. But if I actually drill into a project, you'll notice that now it's changed, and then now it allows me to add scenarios and compare scenarios. So kind of a very different interface once you dive into an actual project. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a scenario. And I'm going to give this scenario a name. And the square footage is important because you can actually drive a lot of calculations off of square footage in planning in these scenarios, which is nice. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. If I had a standard template of what I would want, think of it like as a budget template. If I had a standard budget template, I could apply that here. I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to apply a template for this one, just so I can show you how to add categories by scratch. But once you figured out a template for how each scenario should look, you can just save it as a template and apply that template. So that it saves you a couple steps. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. And now we have a blank canvas here. So what we have to do, we talked about our 3 categories: cost, schedule, cash flow. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add cost, and that's done with this category button. So my first category is gonna be, let's call it planning. And I don't have to put a start and an end date here. I could say, February 2020 to July 2020. I could leave it blank and also just click and drag this out. So there's 2 different ways of adding schedule. It's 100% up to you. So once I've added a category, I think the best step is to start adding items underneath that. So for planning, I could say the first thing to do is feasibility. Thank God for spell check. Then I have, say, legal, and let's say, AE, design cost, all just kind of planning costs here. And I can now put my estimate. So I can say 50,000, 25,000, then my design cost might be 1.2 million. That's one way of entering costs as a lump sum. And that's usually good for planning. Then I would add my duration. And finally, what I need to do, and probably the most, probably the trickiest part to remember when you're creating your scenarios, is that to add your cash flow, you actually have to double click into your blue line. And by double clicking into the blue line, I can either manually add my cash flow or simply apply a curve. So for planning, I'm going to use an inverse S curve. The money is usually spent up front and goes down when it comes to planning. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit apply to that, apply the curve, and hit save. So now that money is accurately portrayed as when it's going to be spent per month, which will tie into our capital plan later on. I'm going to add a category, and that category will be construction, because this is where you can really start to see a lot of the features. Now, notice I didn't add a schedule. I'm going to click and drag it later, but you'll see here on the left, it says LS. That means lump sum. And if I click on this link, it would actually give me a lot of other options. So I just want to go over those briefly. LS, lump sum. UC, unit cost. I was about to say user conference. UC, unit cost. And the unit cost could be based upon any unit that you want. So if you need concrete, if you want to get that granular, you can say I've got 15,000 cubic yards of concrete at $3.95, $3, let's say, and you could go ahead and put it at 45. It does the calculation for you. That's unit cost. So you have lump sum, unit cost, and then you have square footage. So I can simply say how many, what item this is. So based on square footage, we can say lighting. I know that the lighting is going to be $45 a square foot, and it'll calculate that for me automatically. And then next you have the last one, which is F, and that's basically a percentage of another category. So this is great for contingency. If I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add category, I'm going to put my category now. Oh, it doesn't let me do that because I need to create the schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this out to say it's going to be a 2-year project starting at the end of planning. And now I've gone ahead and I've added the duration. Let me double click into it. Cost, schedule, cash flow. I've done my cost, I've done my schedule. I'm going to double click now into it. And I'm just going to put a standard bell curve for construction. I'm going to go ahead and apply the curve and hit save. Great. So the last thing now I want to show, I'm just going to add one more category for contingency. Let me see if I can publish it. Maybe I was going too fast for this. There we go. I'm going to just jump back into it. Had a glitch there. Add another category. It's going to be contingency. I'm not going to add the date because I kind of want to visualize it. I think, you know, contingency will be spent across the entire life of the project. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag. And now I'm going to use this to roll through, and I'm going to say, I want it to be 10% of construction cost. So I'm going to say 10%, and I'm going to pick the category, which is a really neat feature. And that's dynamic. So as I go in and add more money into construction and say, other is going to be 50 million, it goes ahead and it calculates the contingency for me automatically. So just a really cool feature that helps you build out these items. So planning, construction, contingency, this is going to be my template moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit publish. I do want to publish the scenario. In order to add a scenario to a capital plan, it has to be published. And now I have my published capital plan, or published scenario. So one other thing in scenarios I just want to go over is the ability to compare. It's a neat feature. If I want to compare between Medical Hall A and Medical Hall 1, two scenarios, I'm going to click them and I'm going to hit compare. And it just takes you to if you're familiar with bid tabulation in eBuilder, I compare it to that module, really nice and succinct. So this could be a great thing that as you decide, you know, are we going to design, go with design A or go with design B, lets you consider the different categories. So that's comparing scenarios. All right, so I'm gonna go back to my capital plan and now I'm gonna add a scenario to it. So going back, here we have our capital plan and I'm gonna add the plus scenario button. And when I do that, you'll see the scenario name I just added. It's on Project Avicado Medical Center, Medical Hall A, the amount and the schedule. So I'm gonna go ahead and click add. Scenario added. And just for fun, I'm gonna go ahead and add these other two as well. Close. So now you see they add seamlessly to my capital plan, and you'll notice my numbers are now updated. So I've got about $57 million left to spend in fiscal year 20. I'm at a reduction of $38 million now in 2021, and I still have $309 million. So I can go in and even add more projects. Or ultimately, what I may need to do is move this scenario I just made and just shift it all the way to 2022. And now you'll see in real time, it's jumping and showing me that I've now got $33 million to find. So with that, I can go in and I could tweak my funding. I could go in and investigate my active projects to see why they're showing up the way that they are with money, and really just play around to see how everything can fit. So the last component of this, jumping back to our slides, is reporting. So I want to show how you could use the interface, which I kind of just showed a preview of there. I want to show you can export to Excel, and then how the standard reporting in eBuilder works with planning. So using the module to play around, I showed you can move things left and right. Let's go to our actual capital plan that I built earlier and published. Because I want you to see here, as you're kind of moving things around in order to reflect the way that you could properly spend your projects and get a good view, notice on your active projects, there's this exclamation point. And typically in the product in eBuilder, whenever you see that exclamation point, whether it's usually with forms, it means it's a high priority. And in planning this capital plan, what it means is that you need to pay attention to it because something on your project has changed from when you published your capital plan to this month. And this is a really neat feature. You don't really get to see unless you've been planning this for a while, because you have to wait a calendar month in order for it to really reflect. But when I click on this exclamation point, it's going to actually show when I originally captured this in the capital plan, that was the blue curve on this active project. Since then, I've actually updated my cash flow because in last week's webinar, we were saying what the effects of a 3-week delay on your project was. So I can see that visual here that everything is shifted to the right, and I can go ahead and either adopt that current plan, or I can say, you know what, let's keep our capital plan locked with the last, with the baseline cash flow, not with the new one. So I'm gonna go ahead and save current as planned. That dot goes away, and then you'll see our cash is at our blue line is actually shifted over 3 months, and all the money has also shifted over. So that's another way that you can really use the module. You can adjust the funding, which we talked about. Another way to use this is escalation. So when I go to escalation, the cost of construction goes up every year. If your organization has those numbers, I remember working with a few hospitals, the purchasing department already has this data. They know that construction is going up, 2% a year. See, these are broken up into halves. I can go ahead and hit save. And what that's going to do is that's now going to show in your cost of your project. It's going to add that escalation in, which is neat. Something else, if you want to see the cash flow of any of these active projects, as we mentioned, we can double click and you'll see what the cash flow is. This is a wonky curve. Now, exporting to Excel. So I really like this feature. I think it's a really great report. If you have your capital plan, you can just hit export, and that's going to download an Excel sheet. And what that looks like is a very, very helpful report. And this is exactly what it looks like on the export. You've probably never seen anything in eBuilder export like this before. But not only does it, I think, look great, but it's also very interactive. So you can change a number yourself, and all of these columns are actually formulas. So if I make this 50,000, you'll see it's gonna reflect all of the numbers on the bottom. And that's a really nice way for you to flexibly change things, maybe before a meeting with an executive, but just really clean report, generates really fast, has all the information from your capital plan and your projects. And can even show you with any projects that haven't had updates accepted yet. So you've got 2 tabs here, your current working plan, and then the ones that have had their cash flow change that you may not have accepted yet. So all that just comes right out of the box when you export a capital plan. Definitely something that I wanted to highlight and show that would add a lot of value with the data that you're already entering. So that's how you export to Excel. And then the last report I want to show is you have a lot of reports in eBuilder that with the standard reporting you can build. So if I just go to dashboard here, you'll see I've added, this is the entire capital plan in one graph. And it's neat to see, you can't actually do this inside of the capital plan module. You can't get a curve for everything, but this actually does that. So if I refresh with some of the changes we made, you'll see you can build a dashboard that looks like this inside of eBuilder. It's your program cash flow, and I can drill into it, and it takes me to the report module that has all the hard data as well. So some other features we just discussed, view project cash flow, double click the blue line on any of the projects, you can view that project's cash flow. You can use as a cash flow report. So we showed that in the planning module if you build a dashboard or a standard report. And then the escalations feature is important. If you're doing a 10-year, 15-year capital plan, you're gonna need to put in your escalations for it to be accurate. So to circle everything back up, essentially the 3 sections of planning are capital plans, project scenarios, and reporting. I hope I was able to show you the value of the planning module and that it will quickly become one of your favorite modules in eBuilder as well. Don't hesitate to reach out to us for any questions you have on it. And to kind of end this and have some questions and answers before, I know these times of uncertainty are really frustrating both professionally and personally. It's been hard keeping focused and staying positive with all the distractions and negative news out there. But we at Avicado find ourselves feeling more encouraged than ever. We view this as an opportunity. We view this as an opportunity to build a highly engaged remote culture. This is all of us on our Slack call. We view this as an opportunity for everyone to improve their use of technology and to come together as a community of eBuilder users to support one another in those efforts. So we're doing that in two ways. We have our weekly webinar series this is our third one today. And we've also opened up, what you're seeing on our screen, we've opened up our eBuilder Connect platform on Slack. So if you have any other questions, feel free to join this EB Connect and ask any questions with our entire company's on there. We've got a lot of tips, we have a lot of tips, tricks, ideas on there, and we welcome any questions. So with that, I'll open it up to the question and answer section.